Asked for her name and she gave me her Facebook. Asked for her number, she said follow me on Twitter. It's the computer age, so let me upgrade ya. Gotta get with it if you wanna get with it. It's the computer age, it's the computer age, it's the computer.
You're here with me, Nick Thayer. This is we're in my studio in Melbourne, Australia. I'm going to be spending today making some sounds, showing you how I go about starting a track, making drum sounds, processing drum sounds, getting a nice kick sound together, coming up with drum loops, getting a groove happening, all those kind of things. We're going to get some melody stuff happening. At the end of the day, I'm going to package up everything that I've got done. We're going to send it over to Black Noise in their studio in Bournemouth in England. They're going to add their own twist to it, play with some of the sounds. They're going to arrange the track, stretch it out, show you how you turn loops into a full track. They're going to get some MCs, Mike and Lex, Wizards Leave are going to come in and do their thing. And essentially we're going to try and make a banging club track in 24 hours on opposite sides of the world. I don't know if this has been attempted before, but we're going to try it anyway. Today my basic platform I'm going to be writing on is Ableton Live 8 on the MacBook Pro. Essentially I've got the one plug-in synth that I bought as well, the operator. So if you're running Ableton Live 8, you can basically do what we're going to do here today. I'm going to use a bunch of vintage drum sounds. You can find these sample packs anywhere on the internet. I'm going to use a bunch of 808s, some 909s, some Synth drum sounds, some Akai sampler sounds, some rubber drums, all those kind of things, and show you what you can do when you take these vintage sounds and use modern production techniques, modern sampling techniques to process them. So let's get started, shall we? When you're making a club track, as I said, the most important part is generally going to be the drums, and the most important part of the drum track is going to be your kick drums. So I'm going to show you quickly now how I go about making kick drums. Essentially I like to meld 2 or 3 parts of different kick drums together and come up with a composite kick. That way each track is going to be a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit of a different character, and you're going to get some unique sounds coming out as well. So I like to start with just a body of a kick. That's what that one sounds like. And now let's have a look at some of the processing I do on that. First of all, we'll do some compression. I'm not going to spend a long time setting this up. I'd usually spend a bit longer, but I'm just going to show you sort of the basic settings I'd go with. I'm trying to add a bit of front-end snap to this kick, essentially. Bring that down a bit more. You can hear it's really tapering the front end now. Giving it a lot of punch. Maybe wind it back a bit now. And there we go. Now I'm going to add some EQ to it. I'm going to use a low shelf to roll off some of the bottom end. This might seem a bit strange right now, but you'll see where I'm heading with it. A high shelf to roll off some of the top end. And now I'm going to do some notch EQ, and this is something you should be doing with pretty much every track, every sound in your track. What we're doing is looking for renegade frequencies, and we're going to get them out of the track. To do this, you create a peaking EQ, a notch EQ like that. Make it a really thin Q, and just move it up and down until you find sounds that resonate. There'll be notes that ring out. Like that, you can really hear that note ringing out. And what's going to happen there is that's going to muddy up your track. It's going to get in the way of other sounds. It's going to get in the way in your mix, and we don't need it in there, so we're going to take that right out. Going to do another one here, basically the same thing again. As you can hear, there's a few in there. Let's go with that one, and you can come out. And again, this is something I'd probably spend a little bit more time doing, and probably find another couple, especially in a kick drum. It's an important sound, you want to get it right. But for the moment, that's going to have to do us. Now, the second part of my kick drum that I add is kind of a kick drum with a lot more body to it. As you can see, I've already done the EQing. We're going to add some distortion to this as well. And we're going to drive it quite hard. Then I'm going to roll off the top end of that as well, because we don't need it in the mix. So you combine that with the other one, and you've got a thumpy kick with a hell of a lot of front end and a lot of body to it as well. Now, to all of that, I'm going to add an 808. There it is, just booming away. As you can see, I've already done the EQing on that one as well. Bring it down in the mix a little bit. And there you have it. That's how I like to go about making a nice rounded, boomy kick drum with a little bit of character. Okay, so we've got a good sounding kick drum now. That's the guts of any track, and that is going to form the backbone of what we're doing today. Now what we want to do is add some of the more percussive elements, some snare drums, some snaps, some shakers, and those kind of things that are going to add groove to the track. Let's see how we go about that, shall we? Okay, so now I've got my kick drum sounding good. Let's have a look at what I do in terms of snares. I like to have a few different snares so that I can bring them each in and out, and it creates a bit of a flavour and a bit of movement throughout the track. So first up, I've added what I called this cicada snare. It's again just a vintage drum sound. Looks like it's from the DPM 48. Again, just from a sample pack of vintage drum machines. So there it is, sitting on top. Not doing anything hugely amazing, with a bit of a turnaround after every 4 bars. As you can see, I've rolled off some of the bottom end on the EQ just to make it sit better in the mix. Now, on top of that, I've added another 2. These 2 tend to go together. So here's what they sound like together. It's a clap and a sort of really snappy snare drum. And in the mix. And what you can see here is that I've set them off the grid. You can see how one of them is coming essentially before the 2 and the other one's coming a bit after the 2. That's how you can hear them quite clearly over the top of everything else, and they add a bit of movement again. And then the final snare I've added is what I've termed here this military snare. It's doing quite a military rhythm, and again it's just a vintage drum sound. This one is from the Ace RK, and you can see it's doing a bit of a roll. I've used some volume automation there just on the utility plugin to accentuate the roll. So by itself it sounds like this. So it's just adding some movement to the beat. They're all snares that can be brought in and out as the tune would need it. Okay, let's have a look at some of the percussive elements that I'm going to add to the track now. As I said, I'm trying to stay true and use mainly sort of vintage drum machine sounds to form the basis of this track. So I've added this sort of offbeat tom that again is a vintage tom sound. There it is. And I've added this tom fill that I've made here. Again, just 3 sound, 3. We'll have a listen to that by itself. Here it comes. So it's panning across, it's just 3 vintage drum sounds. And on top of that I've put an 808 clap that I've put into a sampler. And it's doing this little thing there, so it's making a nice little turnaround fill. What else have we got in here? Got a reverse tom. And again, it's just a vintage tom sound that I've reversed. You can see the waveform there. Staying true to these vintage drum machine sounds. Got another 808 tom. Some shakers. And again with the shakers, like I did with the claps, you can see that there's one that's coming in a bit before the beat. You can see the waveform there. and there's one that's coming in a little bit after the beat. So it's adding a little bit of texture and movement. Also got a stereo hi-hat that's nice and wide. It's adding some width to the beat. And a distorted hi-hat. You can see I've just got a bit of distortion and some EQ on there. So it's sort of, the two hi-hats together sound very different. So there's some separation. They're not going to get in the way of each other in the mix. And I've also added this gyro. I've added some volume automation over the course of the sort of the 4-bar loop there. Again, I keep coming back to this word. It's all about movement. It's just going to sit in the back of the mix and it's going to do its thing, but it's just sort of creating that little push over the 4-bar loop. Now what I like to do with the percussion is sidechain all of that. Not a heavy sidechain, but just sort of a moderate sidechain over all of the percussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group those. Let's rename that. So they're all coming out of that one group channel now. And I'm going to add a compressor on that group channel. Choose the sidechain, turn it on, taking audio input from the body of the kick. And then we'll get that. So it's not a particularly vicious sidechain that I've got going on there, but it's just adding a little bit of breathe, a bit of push and pull against the kick drum. And again, all of these are parts that they're not going to be in all the time, they're going to be parts that can come in and come out to create movement throughout the track. So we've got a good bass, a good bed happening now. Okay, so we've got some drum loops happening and things are beginning to get rolling. What I'm going to try and do now is create some interesting sounds using a sampler. Where on Ableton the sampler is called the Simpler, although there is a fuller version. And I'm going to load some vintage drum samples into those and show you what can happen when you play around with the sounds and the settings. We're going to try and create some hooks, some melody lines using those things. So what I've got is I've got a MIDI channel here, and I've programmed into the MIDI just by hand just a rhythmic thing, just using the mouse like that just to program it in. And so it's a little 2-bar loop that I've got going on there. It's sort of a repetitive thing for the first 3 sections and then a little turnaround bit at the end. So what I'm going to do first of all is just load Ableton's stock sampler. It's called the Simpler. There it is right there. So we're going to bring that up on here. I'm going to drag a sound that I want to use into that, and again I said I'm going to use a vintage drum machine sound. So you can see I've got my kit samples in here, all of them down there, vintage drum machines. There's a lot of them there. I know that this particular one, the Synth, has some great sounds. So let's just have a listen through some of these and find one that I reckon is going to be good for what we want. As you can see, they're all really cool sounds. They've got a lot of character to them already. That's a nice sound. Could come back to that. Ooh. And as I said, these sample packs are available on the internet. You can just grab them. Oh, here we go. Ooh. I think that's going to be the one. So I'll drag that down into my sampler. And let's have a play around with it. Now, let's see what happens if we play with the end of it, and we'll get the loop on. So we'll try turning the loop on. Oh, I like that, how at the end it's getting higher with the loop. Now we have a nice little hook thing going on, and again I want to sidechain that against the kick drum. Let's get the compressor up there. And as always, a bit of EQ. And again, I'm kind of rushing through these EQs. I'll spend a bit more time getting it sounding right when when I'm not making a video on it. Okay, now that's the kind of sound I want to be quite stereo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the track. There we go, duplicate. So we've got exactly the same thing happening on another track. And what I'll do with this one is make the sound slightly different. So to do this, in this case, I'm going to add a bit of chorus just on that second one. Not too much, just a little bit. Just a real subtle chorus. Now what I can do is I can pan them. I can pan this one sort of about that far left and this one about that far right. So together, and that in the mix. And there you have kind of a little hooky thing. It's probably a bit loud, to be honest. It can come down. It's certainly not going to be the main hook for a track, but it's a nice little background thing. Okay, so I've got my little rubber drum thing that's happening in the sampler. I've done a little bit more work on it so you can hear what it sounds like. So it sounds a little bit, the EQ's a bit thinner, it's a bit more spread, and there's a send delay happening with that. But what I often do with these kind of sounds is add layers. I copy the MIDI part down and just try different sounds with it. So I've copied the MIDI part down onto this channel. I've taken out a couple of the notes. As you can see, there is notes in here, but essentially it's the same MIDI part. And again, it's just with a sampler. With another different sound in it. I've played with the start of the sound. And again, on this channel, I've done the same thing. A sampler, another tom sound. And so they're reinforcing the groove that other drum sound was doing. And again, it's layers of this one sound that I can bring in and bring out as need be. Then the final thing I added was everybody's favourite, a bit of white noise. Again, just using exactly the same MIDI pattern, slightly changed at the start, but essentially the same thing. So that when you've got all of them together, you've got a number of facets of this one sound. And essentially they're all coming from that one MIDI part that we spent a little time doing. So that's one way I like to create layers and parts that you can bring in and bring out to create, again, that word, movement throughout the tune. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a little tom melody happening there and all the residual parts of it. And we really have essentially got the guts of a groove down now. That is going to form the basis of the track. So what we need now is some other bits, some hooks that are going to come in over the top. So now I'm going to try and lay down some synth lines that are going to be able to come in and out, but they're going to be big synth lines, the kind of things that you're going to be able to hum along to on the street. So first up, I've got this lead drill sound. It's just the operator synth here on Ableton doing its thing there. With these kind of lines, I always try and double it up with something else, playing exactly the same thing but a quite different sound. That second synth is slightly detuned. That's what gives it that sort of, strange sound. MIDI wise, there isn't a hell of a lot going on there, just a little bit of pitch automation on that note. So again, it's a part that can come in and out. Maybe they'll use it, maybe they won't. And I created an open fifths type synth line here as well. It's sort of, it goes up, it rises, as you can see from the MIDI. Rhythmically, it kind of follows what the tom part was doing. So if I bring that tom part in, you'll be able to hear. So it sort of reinforces everything that's going on there, gives it a bit more melody. So there you have it. Okay, so we've got all of that done now. I've got all the parts, I've got the demo, I've got the guide vocal, everything's on here for the guys. I'm going to zip this up, send it over to Black Noise, they're going to download it, they're going to add their twist to it, they're going to see what they can come up with. Personally, I can't wait to hear what they do.